I call Mahesh Bindra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a privilege to rise on behalf of New Zealand. First, to speak on the Organised Crimes and Anti-Corruption Legislation Bill. Mr. Speaker, the intent of this bill is to strengthen the law to combat organised crime and corruption. The intent also is to improve New Zealand's ability to collaborate with other like-minded countries to interrupt organised crime and work effectively with the other countries' public officials and law enforcement agencies to respond to future challenges. We like the intent of this bill, Mr. Speaker. The intent is to improve New Zealand's compliance with the OECD Convention on fighting bribery of foreign public officials in international business transactions. I'll come back to this part later in my presentation, Mr. Speaker. Now, touching upon the human trafficking part of the bill has gone to some extent in tidying up the current provisions in terms of simplifying the provisions of human trafficking. The provision has now been added in terms of the purpose of, to cover the purpose of human trafficking for prostitution and slavery, as well as human organ illegal transplants. Now, coming back to the bribery part of it, Mr. Speaker, there has been a change made in the provision with regards to corruption or bribery by foreign public officials. Now, New Zealand citizens, New Zealand permanent residents, and those corporates based in New Zealand will come under the purview of this legislation. However, the waters have been left muddy, Mr. Speaker. We suspect deliberately, with a view to leave some space there for New Zealand corporates as well as private businesses to provide for facilitation payment, which in plain English is bribery. So there's no clarity around how corrupt can a foreign public official be before he or she gets into trouble. Facilitation payments, or in plain language, bribery, as I've said, has been given a wide scope to thrive in. As pointed out earlier, it is a matter of shame that the minister has conceded that small facilitation payments are okay, and at times necessary to get the job done. We think, Mr. Speaker, that has been a deliberate attempt to actually weaken this brilliant piece of legislation. Had David Clinton's SOP been accepted by the other 61 members of this parliament, this legislation could have been stronger and better. However, it was unfortunate that only 60 of us supported that and 61 did not. We have serious issues with this approach, Mr. Speaker. Now, who decides how much a bribe is okay? Whether small or big, a bribe is a bribe. This approach will only contribute towards damaging our image as a transparent and relatively corruption-free country. Mr. Speaker, having traveled in both the larger countries, as David Tandem just mentioned, India and China, it'll take them a long time to change their old culture, but they are working at it. What we are working at is actually damaging our reputation. Our businesses were relatively transparent, relatively clean. However, this sort of anomaly in our laws will give them a wide scope to indulge in bribery or facilitation payments. Now, touching on the now infamous Saudi sheep debacle, Mr. Speaker, had this legislation been appropriately strengthened in good time, a certain minister could have been answering some serious questions as to whether those millions of taxpayers' money, was that facilitation payment or was that plain, simple bribe? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Jonathan Young.
Thank you, sir. I'm very pleased to stand in support of this bill under the name of the Honourable Amy Adams, Minister of Justice. Sir, we have heard a lot of rhetoric today about